Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. This is the last topic of the evening, and I want to thank you guys for hanging in there. The alphabetics was a long topic, but I can't stress how important it is. It is the foundation to everything else that comes with the vocabulary and the fluency and the comprehension. So I am the basic adult coordinator, the adult basic learner coordinator, and I use a lot of the alphabetics with my students, especially the nonsense syllables, because I want to make sure that they really understand decoding. Because if you can't decode, it doesn't matter what the teaching vocabulary. The important thing is that you can look at a word and begin to break it down, put it together, and then learn the meaning. So vocabulary study follows the ability to decode. Um, the ESL vocabulary strategies that we covered on Tuesday focused on oral practices, dialogues, and conversations, such as asking for directions or simple business transactions. This topic is going to look a little bit more closely at teaching reading strategies for text. And I guess I'm the one driving this. Oops, okay. Okay. Learning objectives for this topic include reviewing what vocabulary is and why it's important. We're going to look at 3 tiers of vocabulary words. We're going to ask, when am I going to teach vocabulary? What am I going to teach? And how am I going to teach, basically. Karen? Karen? Is Karen there?
I am.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I'm having a little technical difficulty here.
I was just going to start, so I'm glad you're back.
So the dictionary says that, we can go to the next screen, I think, Lynn, that vocabulary is the body of words in any language. It can also mean the body of words known to a particular person, as in George has a large vocabulary. Perhaps you recall the definition we gave during the ESL discussion on vocabulary, when we told you that for our purposes, we define vocabulary as the collection of words we know the meaning of when we hear, say, read, and write them. Vocabulary instruction is much more involved than just teaching the meaning of words. And again, you probably previously saw that vocabulary instruction to beginning ESL students starts with listening and speaking, focusing on oral vocabulary. But vocabulary instruction also includes reading and writing, where print vocabulary is the focus. Okay, once again, we're going to show you this tree that is so important to the process. Earlier, we focused on oral vocabulary. Now we're focusing on why vocabulary is also important for reading. And again, this is a little bit of review here. First, when people read, they decode the words they see in print by using their knowledge of alphabetics. Then they connect those print words to their known oral vocabulary. The larger the oral vocabulary, the more likely they are to recognize the printed word. But when a word is not part of their oral vocabulary, readers can't be sure that they've decoded the word correctly and may not be sure of the text's meaning. Readers also need a large recognizable print vocabulary to be able to read fluently, because it helps them decode words quickly and accurately. And when readers know the meaning of a word, they can use the proper rhythm and emphasis, which are key elements of fluency, and there will be more discussion on fluency in a later session. The third reason why vocabulary is important to readers relates to reading comprehension. Clearly, knowing the meanings of individual words is vital to understanding the meaning of the text as a whole. A large vocabulary can also help a person read and understand a wider variety of texts, even on unfamiliar topics. Knowing the meaning of words provides context for readers, helping them to decode other words in the sentence accurately. So building vocabulary helps to improve future comprehension.
The English language contains about 175,000 words in current use, 2 million words in all, but 175,000 that are currently and commonly used. Obviously, however, not all words are equal as far as teaching language instruction. So how do we know which words we need to teach? We do that by sorting words into what we call tiers, depending upon their frequency of use and their complexity. Tier 1 words consist of the most basic. For beginning ESL students, most of their vocabulary study will come from this tier. The words rarely require defining for adult basic learners, although spelling may very well be an issue with the basic student. This level is sometimes often called playground words because they're used in basic social interactions and typically do not have multiple meanings. Early reading books use these words. Linguists estimate that there are about 8,000 tier words, so don't worry about running out if you're worried about teaching. Academic or abstract words are higher level words found in a variety of content. They often have multiple meanings and add descriptions and detail. These words may be words that your student will have heard before, but they may not be exactly sure of the meaning. For intermediate and advanced students, focus vocabulary instruction on these second level words. For example, I had a student, and this was pre-pandemic, who was nervous about taking a flight to visit relatives. So we had a lesson where we talked about flying. We talked about the process. We studied travel-related English words such as the TSA, security, economy, baggage restrictions, early check-in, that kind of level of word. The third tier is a specialized vocabulary. These are words related to specific areas, usually, things like health and finance, college level, job, career things, business and scientific jargon. People typically learn these words only when they need to, and they do not become a part of a person's everyday vocabulary. You may never teach tier 3 vocabulary. So now that we know what to teach, how do we teach? When you're formally teaching vocabulary as part of a reading lesson, there are 4 general principles. The first is to pre-teach words that students need to know to comprehend the text. Before you make an assignment, look over the text and identify words that you think your student isn't going to know. Now, if you're using published materials, this will be done for you. Usually before the lesson starts, there's a page at the top, a paragraph, and it will list words in the selection that you want to pre-teach. You may have to do that yourself if you find your own text material. The second principle is to repeat the vocabulary word often. When students see a new word, it's helpful to not only see it, but pronounce it, speak it, and write it. Don't be concerned if it takes several repetitions before your student understands the meaning. Teach vocabulary not only to expand the size of your student's vocabulary, that's the breadth, but to create deep understandings. For intermediate and advanced students especially, depth involves teaching nuances between words. Like for instance, what's the difference between cheap and inexpensive? They don't mean the same thing, although they might be used interchangeably. Depth also means explaining words with multiple definitions like pool, stand, or racket. Finally, you want to teach your students some basic word learning strategies. And this was mentioned as part of the last presentation in alphabetics. There are 3 word learning strategies that students can use to help them decipher meaning. One is how common prefixes and suffixes affect the meaning of a word and the usage of a word. This would be prefixes like pre and un and miss, and then suffixes like ing or li for adverbs. The second thing to teach a student is how to use context clues to identify meaning. And again, we covered that in the last section. An example would be, he tiptoed quietly past the open door. Well, if you don't know what tiptoed means, there are a few words in there that will help you, mostly quietly and open. Finally, how to use dictionaries. This is really important to teach your student from day one. They're online, they can get them on their phone, or they're also in hard copies. You'll hear some more of these strategies later on in the workshop. Now, when do we teach vocabulary? If you're doing a formal reading lesson, there's 3 parts to the lesson: before reading, during reading, and after reading. Before reading is when you're going to pre-teach the higher level words using direct instruction. You want to limit your list of words for beginning students to about 5, for intermediate or advanced to 10. Any more than that may be overwhelming. During reading, the tutor and the student can return to the text, and you're going to maybe find additional words that you didn't know they didn't know. Unless you're practicing fluency, which is where you don't want to stop, you can stop and explain the word, ask questions, make sure they understand. This will help the student comprehend the text. After reading, you go back to the text and you look at it very closely. Here you can do some reinforcement activities, which we're going to show you soon, and you'll be able to add on additional word learning strategies. Remember, however, that you don't have to use every activity that we're showing you in every lesson. You can overwhelm the student.
Okay, here's a routine to use when pre-teaching new words to students. You can vary this process or do other activities that have similar parts. You would start by showing the new word and reading it aloud. Then ask the student to divide the word into syllables and have them write it down. The ability to spell words correctly is heavily influenced by a person's written vocabulary. Dividing words into syllables helps a lot with spelling and pronunciation. Next, ask the student if they have some understanding of the word before giving them the definition. If they have some prior knowledge, you can easily build on what they already know. And finally, ask the student to put the definition in their own words and use the words in a sentence related to their experience. This helps the student incorporate the new word into their vocabulary. Okay, we're going to watch a very short video of a vocabulary lesson. Even though this video shows a face-to-face session, the technique the tutor uses is easily transferred to an online format.
Well, that's not good. There we go.
So our next lesson is titled Help in an Emergency. Now, the book has identified some words, and I read through the story and picked out some words that would be good to talk about before you read. These are words that you may or may not know, but they're good words to learn because you may read or hear them in a lot of different places. Going over the words before you read the story will help you to understand the story better. Okay, let's take a look at, for example, this word. Tersely. Have you ever heard that word before?
I don't know. I think I may have.
Well, maybe you've heard of this word, terse. That's the root word for tersely.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Let's take a look at it. A lot of letters, okay, listen to it. Tersely. How many syllables did you hear?
2?
That's right, 2 syllables. And where were they? What are they?
Terse and lee.
Very good. Now, if you were to break that apart, where would you divide that word? Draw a line through it. Excellent. That's exactly right. Now, say the first syllable and write it for me.
Terse.
and say the second syllable and write it.
Lee.
Exactly right. Good job. Now, you said you may have heard of the word tersely or terse before. What do you think it means?
I think it means meanly, like to talk to someone meanly.
Okay, you're very close, and I totally get why you would say that. So, tersely means to speak to someone using very few words, right? Like if you were at work and you're talking to one of your coworkers and another coworker says, "Be quiet," okay? That would be an example of speaking tersely, but it's not necessarily mean, right? Or in an emergency situation, maybe a fireman or a paramedic, an EMT, speaks tersely because there's no time, right? They don't have a lot of time to talk. So do you think you understand what tersely means, or would you like a few more examples?
No, I think I know what it means.
Okay. Can you tell me what tersely means in your own words?
Tersely. To talk short with someone. To be short with them.
I like that definition. Let's write that down.
To talk shortly. To be short with them.
Great. Can you think of a time when you spoke shortly to someone or someone spoke shortly to you and then used tersely in a sentence about that time?
I tersely said to my kids, "Get out," while I was cooking dinner.
Yeah, good. And I think that's a good example of being short but not necessarily mean, right? So let's write that sentence down.
I tersely said to my kids, "Get out," while I was cooking dinner.
Awesome. Let's look at another word.
Okay, I hope you noticed that the tutor validated the student's understanding of the word and then built on that understanding in order to explain the actual definition of tersely. He praised the student whenever possible, even if she was not completely right. And he used phrases like "good try" or "I can see why you might think that," encouraging her to continue working at it. And in the end, he had her use the word according to her own understanding or in a way that would reflect her own life. We're running a little late here, but the next couple of slides will be about some vocabulary activities. This first one is a word chart activity illustrating a variation of traditional flashcards. Not only are these cards useful for introducing new words to the student and providing a record of new words that can be used for reinforcement, but they can also help the student get a deeper understanding of the words. In this example, the student writes the new word on the front of the index card, and then on the back he writes a definition in their own words, writes a sentence using the word, and writes an anonym or opposite for the word. You can see that or you can imagine, I guess, that some words are more challenging than others. Hot versus cold would be very easy, but some words don't have a natural opposite. And you can probably see that the example on the screen could be a hard one. Okay, so for the word ironic, we chose the word predictable as an antonym for the word. Another reasonable opposite could be logical. I think we've already mentioned that one of the other benefits of using flashcards for vocabulary words is that they create a physical record of what the student is learning. And last but not least, when teaching students, don't forget the power of video and music to reinforce vocabulary. It's a very powerful tool. You probably all remember the French song Frere Jacques. I hope you do. because I'm not going to sing it to you, but it's a little nursery rhyme that would very quickly help you to remember the French for Brother John, are you sleeping? Morning bells are ringing, ding dong ding. There are lots of songs on YouTube that you can find that would give you a little musical reminder to help students practice their vocabulary and get it stuck into their hands. Okay, we're starting to lose people. There are a lot of ideas in your handout package on how to do vocabulary lessons and way to vary the kinds of things that you use for practice. I think we've talked a good deal about how ordinary games, off-the-shelf kinds of activities can be used to give you opportunities to practice vocabulary. Taboo, password are real good examples of those kinds of vocabulary builders. They all involve some variation of describing a word for your partner to guess. In addition to keeping a picture file, you can search Google Images on the fly using your phone or computer for a visual representation. You know, for instance, the word jumper, when it's used to describe a piece of clothing, might be hard to understand and you might need a picture. A picture dictionary is very helpful, not only for building vocabulary, but also for developing a dialogue and for communicating with your student. You can use the dictionary to illustrate words on issues or topics that come up during the lesson. You can use the dictionary for examples of context where you would practice the words. We've included a picture of the new Oxford Picture Dictionary that illustrates the meaning of over 2,000 useful vocabulary words within the context of everyday living. It's great for teaching categories, I'm having trouble talking, because of its layout. The tool is online and available in print from many sources. Hey, Lynn Scott, one other little vocabulary game.
This is just an example of an online vocabulary game. I don't think that we have to actually go through it. There are hundreds and hundreds of really good games. You've seen many of them already. This one happens to focus on when you use a and when you use some. So explore. And of course, you'll get copies of this video, so you'll be able to get the website right from this slide.